Hello and welcome to the Rise Up in Business podcast. I'm Tracy Myler-Crane and I'm your host. This is the legal and business podcast for small business owners, where I draw from my experience as a business lawyer and the insights I've gained from supporting hundreds of service-based businesses. When it comes to what can go wrong in business, there is nothing I haven't seen. I believe prevention is better than cure, always. And through this podcast, I'm sharing with you what you need to know to build strong legal foundations in your business and to set yourself up for long-term sustainable success. Let's dive into today's episode. Do you know that feeling when you meet somebody and the work that they do resonates with you so deeply that you just want to get more of it? That's how I feel about the work that my guest today does. I'm joined today by Daniel Sih, who is the founder of Spacemakers. Daniel is a client of mine. We've been working together for a number of years, and I love what he does so much that I'm so delighted to bring Daniel onto the podcast to share some of what he does with you. Daniel's a wellbeing and productivity coach. He helps busy people make space to build intentional and meaningful lives. And that can go in so many directions. I know that that's probably what you're thinking. Daniel's work has resonated with me on so many levels over the years, and I share some of those examples in the episode today. And the nuggets of gold that Daniel has shared that I know that so many listeners will be able to take away and action is just the tip of the iceberg, even if that. There is something here for everybody, no matter what stage of business you're at or where you're struggling or where your pain points are or what your vision or mission is right now. Let's dive into the episode with Daniel. I hope you love it as much as I do, and I'll be back with you at the end. Daniel, hello. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, it's great to be here, Tracy. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, I'm so grateful for your time, and I'm so pleased that you were able to make space to come on to the podcast to talk about this.
Anytime. You've been tremendously valuable in our business, and so it's great to be able to connect with you in this new way.
Thank you. You and I have been working together for quite a while, and we work together in the sense that you're doing all sorts of creative, amazing things in your business, and I support you with all the legal side of things. But in full transparency, I take a lot of value from the content that you share and the conversations we have. And I'm so happy to be sharing that with listeners today because I know that they will get so much value too. Before I dive in and start talking about the habits that I've picked up, can you just give us a quick overview of the work that you do with small business owners in the context of making space and productivity?
Yeah. So look, my heartbeat or passion is to help busy people make space, as you've described, actually to make space and keep pace. So by space, I mean living intentionally and thoughtfully, reflecting on what their habits are, their practices and their systems, and then shaping their life in a way that allows them to have some margin. So yeah, that's my heartbeat. But I'm a productivity expert, consultant. But by productivity, I mean I want people to think about the life they want, the work they want, what does success look like in the short and long term, and then how do they shape their habits and systems and practices so they can save time, they can improve focus and actually live the life that they want. And for me, that's what I call making space.
Just all of that. Everybody would be putting their hand up and saying, yes, please, I'll take some of all of that, please. And that's what I've done in the time that you and I have been working together, and I listened to your podcast, which is excellent, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But the concept of making space really struck me when I first met you many years ago, and I thought, gosh, what does that actually mean? And then your LinkedIn is very good for little nuggets of gold that you share, and you're very good at sharing what it is that you've been doing in your own life to make space. And I sent you an email once, and I got your out-of-office reply, and I loved it so much that I stopped what I was doing and I sat back and thought, what does it mean to make space? Because you'd said something along the lines of, you're away from your inbox, you're doing X, Y, Z. If it's urgent, contact your assistant here. However, I'm not a brain surgeon, so it's probably not that urgent. You could take this as an opportunity to make space. And I loved that. That was the reaction I got. And I thought, oh, I wish that I could do that. And I sat back and thought, I'm actually going to go and do that. And I started making space really intentionally. So it's a phrase that's used in my household often, Daniel, about just making space and spaciousness and what that looks like. And I tell you, I feel like I'm a work in progress, but there is some grounding to it. There's some grounding to it. Can you just talk about the concept of making space?
Yeah, look, I love it. It's the first time ever on a podcast that anyone's quoted my out of office. I've had books quoted, but never my out of office reply. So this is the first.
It really resonated.
It's great, but it's true, right? I mean, look, I used to be a physiotherapist, so I have a health background. Maybe that's where it came from. But I'm a productivity expert. No one's going to die if they don't get a response back. So what you've really touched on, I think, is an aspect of making space. There are a number of parts of that, which is boundaries, which is having a sense of, how important is your work really? How essential is it? Or, what are the consequences of you not being available? And how can you actually get a bit of a rain check on your own kind of importance so that you can step back from work, not be available, not be able to be contacted, and actually have space so that you can live a life and be at your best? I think it's very hard for business owners. We feel like we have to be on all the time. We're fearful that if we don't respond, something terrible will happen. And look, maybe some somewhat bad things will happen. But again, we're not brain surgeons, right? Probably. If you are a brain surgeon, well, someone else can cover the brain surgery when you're on holidays. But I think part of making space is reflecting on your beliefs and actually accepting that we need to be human and we need to love our businesses. I've coached a number of leaders who have become quite successful, and then they turn around and say they actually hate their business because it doesn't give them a life. Their business has taken over their life, and they built a business to have a life. And so we need to constantly reflect on what is it that we're doing, why are we doing it, and then how do we actually have patterns of on and off, what I call keeping pace and making space. How do we become more efficient and effective in what we do, and also know how to unplug, disconnect, and actually be human? And that's actually the secret of what it looks like to live sustainably and to be profitable longer term. So I know you've just mentioned an out of office reply, but the heartbeat behind that is actually, if I need to go away for 2-3 weeks with my family and not be available, I don't check my email. I've created systems and people who can actually review and support my business. And yes, they can call me if there's an emergency, but it happens very rarely.
So you mentioned something that I think, let's dive into. You mentioned something I think is really important. At the beginning of that, you'd said the business owners that you worked with are fearful that if they don't respond, something's going to happen. Is it fearful that something's going to happen, or is it fearful that the work will fall away, that there won't be any more clients, that they need to be delivering? What's underpinning the fear that keeps us, myself included, stuck to the inbox and the constant need that we feel the need to be on and available?
Yeah, look, I think there's a lot of different types of fears. I might share a story if that's all right, and then I'll come back. So there's a great story by Dan and Chip Heath, and I'm sure it's a fable, but there are two fishermen. They're on a beautiful lake. It's sunny. They're enjoying the day, and then all of a sudden they see a child splashing around in the water. This is a fable, so let's not get too freaked out, okay? So this child's drowning, and they quickly paddle over and they pull the child out of the water, and they're kind of helping this poor child recover and wondering how they got in the water. And then they see another child a bit further downstream who are just like, same thing, drowning, splashing around. So they're like, oh my gosh. They quickly paddle over and grab this child. And then as they do that, they realize there's two other children like at a different part of the river who are all splashing. And they're like, this is insane. So there they are going back and forth, trying to rescue these kids. It keeps happening. And as they kind of get to the point where they can't possibly rescue all these kids, one of the fishermen jumps out of the boat, swims to shore, and he kind of just disappears. As he's doing so, his mate says, where are you going? We have to rescue these kids. And his mate who's swimming turns around and says, I'm going upstream to find out who's throwing in the children into the river. And I love this idea that sometimes, okay, so obviously with systems processes, we're reactive, we're frantic. That's the obvious, moral of this story, that sometimes we have to go upstream to work out why we're so busy and frantic. But what I've recognized coaching hundreds of leaders is I actually think we have to go upstream in terms of our internal beliefs, monologues, and ideas. What Nir Eyal, who wrote Beyond Belief, would call a limiting belief. We actually need to reflect on our limiting beliefs, because I'm convinced that they are upstream to our inability to slow down, set boundaries, and make space a lot of the time. So if I go to your question, what is causing the fear, meaning what stops us from being able to actually have a life, to live sustainably, to have boundaries where we need to, and to disconnect from the noise when it's helpful, I actually think a lot of the time it's a series of limiting beliefs that we have that we're not willing to confront. And we almost need to identify them upstream in order to reframe them from a limiting belief to a liberating belief, so that we can actually shift our boundaries and have an out of office on and actually not check our email. So when you ask the question, what's behind the fear? Well, I've coached lots of people and there's clearly multiple factors that lead to fear, but common things I hear are, I would feel guilty if I wasn't available. What if I miss out on this opportunity? If I can't do this, no one else will be able to do it. I'm the only one who can do this. Sometimes it's actually, I just love new things and I love opportunities, so I don't want to stop. Sometimes it's, I'm the busiest person in the room, or I'm valuable because I work hard, or business owners have to work hard. That's the only way they survive, right? So again, unless we go upstream and work out what are the particular beliefs that stop us from unplugging, putting on an out of office, and finding strategies to use VAs or team members or, depending on the size of your business, to actually have some time off, then I think it's going to be very hard to actually put in what I call the Spacemaker practices. So it's both and beliefs and then rituals, practices, and habits to actually live a good life and to be productive. I mean, I have a highly successful business. I'm pro-business. I'm pro-making money. I'm pro-working hard. And I'm pro-making space so that we can live a life and enjoy the business we've created.
There's a lot there. Thank you for sharing that. Let's go back to that. How do you do it? So I'm not even going to dive into all the things and not even going to use myself as an example because, as I said, I'm a work in progress, but very happily working in progress and certainly making good progress. How do you do it? Talk to us about that. So you do have a successful business. You do make money. You do have space. You do, it looks like from the outside, have balance because you've just come back from a fabulous time away with your family. How do you do it?
Yeah. Look, I love the quote, I teach best what I most need to learn. And I nearly burnt out in my 30s. So, I come from a place where I worked my guts out. I'm a type A personality. I love creating stuff. I'm entrepreneurial by heart. And I got to the stage where I nearly burnt out, to the point where I had breathlessness and some other issues. So I suppose I came from that place. And that's why I care so much about helping people be highly productive and deeply human, which is what my book Spacemaker is about. And so that doesn't leave you. I'm someone who has to wrestle constantly with not starting. Like, if you give me a long holiday, I'll come back and start a new business. I need to be careful.
Okay.
Not to start the new thing. So that's kind of my personality type, if that makes sense. And I love working. I love what I do. I actually find it harder to rest than work. So within that context, what I've discovered is I need to practice rest. I need to work out what is work for me, what is rest for me, and how do I habitualize rest? And then how do I build it into my pattern as a routine? Not just because it makes me more productive, but because actually I want a breadth and depth in my life that isn't just work, but I have to discipline that part. So some people have to discipline themselves to work. I have to discipline myself to rest. So look, there's lots of practices. I turn off my phone at a particular time at the night. I don't charge my phone in my bedroom, so I start and end the day with a bit of space. I have a weekly, this is the big one, I have a weekly digital Sabbath, so I have no phones, email, and screens 24-hour period every week, and I habitualize that. Now, there's a lot of beliefs and practices that are built into that, but that's where I'm at now after practicing that for a while. I have regular holidays, and I plan my holidays before I plan my work. So I'm a professional speaker. At the beginning of the year, I put in my holidays and that becomes sacrosanct. So if anyone wants me to speak, even if it's, I had a huge client, I won't say the name because everyone knows the company, but I would have loved to work with them, but they asked me to do a conference during my holidays. Now I book my holidays and you don't get in my calendar. So I just gave up that opportunity. Maybe I'll never get to work with this global client, but I walked on the Camino with my kids and I had a great holiday. So it comes down to intentionally creating daily, weekly, and annual habits of making space and then working very, very efficiently and well around the sides. At least that's kind of one of the strategies. But again, it means going upstream first so that I value space. And so I truly believe that I'll have a more successful business if I work smart and rest well.
Two things, so much I'm busting to ask you after that. Two things. You've said you value space. So in the work that you've done upstream, Is part of that work getting really clear on priorities? Because it sounds to me like your holidays and your space are a really high priority. And perhaps that's where some of us fall down, because we don't have that clarity on the priorities. Because there'd be so many business owners listening to this thinking, holy dooly, if that was my business, I would have, whether it be right or not, taken time away from my holiday to go and work for that client. But I'm finding it so empowering that you didn't. And I'm thinking, gosh, that's walking the walk after talking the talk right there. But there was work to do before you got to that point, because that wouldn't have been easy. So at some point in time, that wouldn't have been easy. It sounds like it was easy when you did it, but at some point...
Oh, no, it wasn't easy. I still wonder whether I could have taken that client, but that's a value that you put in place, right? I suppose it's a hierarchy of values. What comes first? Well, my health, my family, my inner life, the ability to think deeply and be strategic, the ability to learn, like these things come above the frantic activity. Now, of course, there have to be compromises. This may date your podcast episode, but it's the census week this week. And I had the most frantic, busy week of, I reckon, my entire work career last week. I spoke 4 keynotes in 4 cities of Australia, plus I ran other online courses. I did 25 hours of actual delivery in some major conferences. It was insane. And I added up my hours because the census said I had to, and I did 75 hours, which is like a huge week.
Wow.
But then on the weekend, I made sure I had absolutely zero commitments and no plans, because I knew I'd need that. Plus I had a massage because we preloaded that. And next weekend, I'm flying my whole family up to Melbourne because I'm again away for 2 weeks traveling, which is a lot of activity. So I preloaded that I'm going to have a weekend in Melbourne with my family because A, I've got a bit more money because I'm earning a lot this month, and B, I knew in advance that I wouldn't have enough family time. So that's more of a boom and bust type of pattern, work really hard and then have time with my family, which isn't the ideal, but you have to be flexible. And there are times where you work hard and then you rest hard. There are times where you try to get a more balanced cadence and rhythm. But I think it's about, look, the Spacemakers, the podcast is all about living an intentional, meaningful life. This allows me to earn a heap of money, make a huge impact across Australia, and still build the relational capital I need with the people I care about most. And so that's the way I'm running it this month. It'll change next month. It's less of a disciplined, everyday reality and more of an intentional way of living, if that kind of makes sense, which is what business is. You have to flex, right?
It is, absolutely. And I'm loving it so much because, again, coming back to priorities, and it seems to me like the priorities and the values are going hand in hand here. And you are really clearly very anchored to your values. So you are really clear on your priorities. You just listed them off the top of your head. You listed 5, and business being a priority, but it was number 5. And I love that. And then you're making decisions around the use of your time anchored into those values and priorities. The work, you'll do it, but you need the family time and you've got to make time for the rest. And I'm loving that it is so flexible. As I'm just imagining in my mind Lego pieces, and you're just moving them around to suit what's happening at the time. So there's freedom and flexibility in that. And so when we hear this sort of thing, get clear on your values and your priorities, straight away we start thinking, I'm going to be locked into this and it's all about discipline and I don't have willpower. But you're not saying any of that. You're saying it's so free and flexible, but it comes after having the clarity on the values, because you then know where to put those pieces. Would that be a fair representation?
I think that's true. Now, maybe 2 caveats for the practicality of it. While I've put it in that order, so firstly, sometimes I get it wrong because we run small businesses, right? And they're tough. And sometimes the work's not there, so you have to do extra hours. Sometimes the work is there, so you have to do extra hours. So, there's a bit of realism in this. When I say that's my value set, it absolutely is, my health, my inner life, my kids, my family. But that doesn't mean they get the bulk of my time, so that's important to recognize. I still work really hard, but when I make decisions, they come first. But it doesn't mean I'm spending all my time with my family. Does that kind of make sense? So you can have them as a priority, and yet they're not representing the bulk of your calendar because life is life. The other thing, I loved what you said. I think that prioritization requires a context. And so when people say to me, I'm struggling, with back-to-back meetings, with my inbox, with constant noise, the inability to prioritize. This is the bulk of what I do. I teach people how to work smarter. I always ask them, what are your greater yeses? What are you trying to achieve? And if the clearer people are about what matters, what their yeses are, what their values are, what strategies and activities lead to success in the business, well, the easier it is to say no to that email, to turn off those notifications, to say no to that opportunity, that podcast, that event, because it's going to be a no for a greater yes. So that requires that you do the internal work and the strategic work, that you know what drives your business outcomes and you know what your values are in your life. Like, what does it look like to create a business by design, so that you can then say no, set boundaries, and actually shape your practical calendar, email, and time in alignment with that. So prioritization requires a context, whether it be values or whether it simply be your strategy and tactics. So I think we're speaking the same language, but I kind of wanted to broaden it out to get practical, because it is a very practical reality here. You can't unplug from an email if you don't know what your goals are for the next 3 months as a business. It's so important to step back and actually think deeply about where you're heading.
Which is the clarity piece. And I picked that up on just about everything that you're saying comes back to the clarity piece. We will put into the show notes all of your details, and I want to talk about the podcast in a moment because I do listen to that. Your LinkedIn is so valuable. I do share things with you sometimes. I do comment sometimes. I am a lurker, though, on LinkedIn. I self-confessed I am a lurker. I don't do that much commenting and interaction on LinkedIn. Whether I should or not, I don't know. But you share so much value on there that business owners can actually take away and implement right now. And one of the tips that I've picked up from you, which I probably never shared this with you, is one of your email strategies, your inbox strategy. So I have 2 set times a day now that I will go into my inbox and I will sit. It takes me a long time. There's a lot to do in there, but I allocate an hour and I will sit and I'll do what I can in an hour, and then I come away. And then I go back later in the afternoon and I do the same thing. And I don't always get it right, but I'm getting better. But that has been a game changer for my focus, because what I was finding is I was falling into a space of I'm constantly in my inbox, wanting to make sure I'm responding to everybody as quickly as I can, which was foolish because nobody expected me to respond instantly. But it was eating up all of my day and I wasn't being productive. And then I was finding I was working really late at night and I need my sleep and I wasn't getting it. So the whole thing was just getting untenable. And then I saw something so simple, which was, don't do that. Don't do that. Just pick 2 times. And I did. And this is something that I picked up on your LinkedIn. It was something so small, which had such a significant impact. And I'm hearing myself as I say this out loud and you think, oh gosh, well, it's not genius, Tracy. Of course you shouldn't be in there all the time. But it's hard because I didn't have clarity on how I wanted to be spending my weeks.
Oh, you're in the vast minority. I mean, Email Ninja is how I started my business 15 years ago. Like, it's an inbox zero course that helps you get to zero. And I mean, I've asked thousands of leaders, okay, when you're at your desk and you've got your screen on, I ask kind of as if I'm dumb, how often in the day would you have email open? Would it be 5 times a day or 3 times a day? And then like people are looking, like, does not compute. I don't understand the question. Like, it's all the time. Of course it's all the time. And they just multitask all the way through the day. My assumption is that you've also turned off email notifications if you're unplugging. So if you turn off email notifications and basically either you have a rhythm of checking email a few times a day, or simply that you have times where you don't check email to do focused deep work, like you're in the top 5% of people who will be able to achieve meaningful work. And yet it's very hard to do culturally. So no, I 100% agree. And I say email is the runway of productivity. If you can't get away from email, which doesn't mean you ignore it, it means you have really smart strategies to use it really well when you're using it, to prioritize, to use AI, to make great decisions about when to delay and when to action emails, and then disconnect from email. If you can't do that, well, then you can't get up off the runway into the higher levels of thinking, which is projects, goals, values, planning, strategy. So you do need to actually have basic productivity tools to manage your communication and other kind of inputs so that you cannot be drowned by them and directed by them day by day.
Productivity tools.
Well, productivity helps you make space. So when I say, if that's okay, when I talk about making space, that doesn't mean having long holidays all the time and always turning off your phone. It actually requires that you keep pace. So you know how to use email well. You know how to turn off notifications. You know how to use AI. You know how to manage your cognitive load with to-do lists. You know how to time block. You know how to create rhythms and structures so that you actually get your best work done. that's part of making space. Like, it's pace and space are the yin and yang of productivity. If you don't work fast and smart, and if you don't set boundaries and disconnect, you can't be productive. It's both, and it's not just a well-being message. That's really important just to clarify, because we've mainly focused on the well-being aspect, if that makes sense.
Yeah, we have. And I'm glad that you shared that, because in my mind, that's why we do it. We make sure that we are looking after the well-being so that we can be productive and we can do all the things. So thank you for sharing that. You mentioned Email Ninja. I know that that's on your website. There's quite a few resources on your website. We're going to include the link to your website in the show notes for anybody who wants to dive into this, because your website is very helpful, as are your books. And you mentioned the Spacemakers book, but you also have Wise AI, which I think is really relevant as well for business owners.
Yeah, Spacemaker and Wise AI are the two workplace books. Actually, if you're interested with email stuff, emailninja.com is our website for just Email Ninja, as opposed to my main business website. You can get 3 videos to show you how to start the email journey. They're completely free and they can be useful. Feel free to have a look at them.
That's amazing. That's an amazing resource, as is the podcast, the Spacemakers podcast. And that's something that I listen to regularly. You have lots of guests. You have some really good conversations where you can just pick out nuggets of gold that you can actually just take away and implement into your business, which is what I try to do with this podcast. And I love that it's a very user-friendly podcast, your podcast, such that you don't need to actually carve out, half a day to listen to things and then try and work out what it all means. It's all very clear and very practical and very doable. So that's something else that we'll include in the show notes as well. And we'll also include the link to your website. Daniel, thank you so much for your time. We could talk for hours, I think, on all of this, but I love that we've just touched on some of the key things that you do to set yourself up for success in your business and your life, and some of the little nuggets that I've taken away and that I'm happily working away on in my own business. So thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been great to have a conversation.
We could have talked for hours. I know that you sense that too. And what Daniel was able to share and what I was able to share in that short and sharp episode was just a hint of the sort of work that he does with leaders and the impact that the work that he does has on business owners, leaders, organisations, founders. So I shared some of the ways that I've implemented Daniel's nuggets of gold over the years, and I hope that there was something there that you resonated with too. I'm sure there would have been. We will include the details to Daniel's podcast, the Spacemakers podcast, and the website in the show notes below. And also the Email Ninja website that he mentioned, we'll include that in the show notes too, so you can dive in and take a look and take what works for you for now. If you know a business owner that you think would benefit from listening to the conversation I had with Daniel, please feel free to share the episode. It would mean so much. Together, that's how we get the podcast into the ears of even more business owners. As always, thanks so much for joining me. I'll catch you next time.